Welcome to something I have never done before, and I think this is the moment. I would like to read some chapters in Writing Down Your Soul to you. And of course, I've got to start with the introduction because when the book came out in 2009, there was no introduction. And then when it got the owl and a whole new cover, and I can't even tell you how many reprints and edited new editions, but always with the owl, once again, no introduction. But in 2021, my publisher put out a new edition, and so this is the cover you want to be looking for because this is the only version that has the introduction. And I would like to read the introduction to you. To know more about the intensive on Deep Soul Writing with Friends, a link to my website, just click. If you're here on YouTube with me, click and follow the links. But for now, let us listen to the introduction to Writing Down Your Soul, how to activate and listen to the extraordinary voice within by me, Janet Connor. Introduction. This morning, as I began deep soul writing with my beloved feminine divine voice, I found myself revisiting a familiar, if still unanswerable, question. I return to this question often because somewhere embedded in the labyrinth of this question is a sacred and beautiful seed of who I am and who I am becoming. And if I can find that seed, I can pass it on to you, and you can explore who you are and who you are becoming too. This question surfaced for the first time 23 years ago, when everything I knew and thought I valued was crashing to the ground. Marriage, house, career, hard-earned savings, even friendships were being swept away by some invisible, voracious river of grief and woe. And yet, when I picked up a pen for the first time on April 23rd, 1997, I felt something different, something that transcended my tears. I felt a wee touch of comfort. I felt heard. And so I returned the next day and the next day and the next day, simply wanting to re experience that little window of grace. But then something strange happened. One day, I slammed an angry question onto the page, and out of my hand poured a wise and loving response. I yelped and dropped the pen. Those words most certainly did not come from me, not the angry, bitter, sobbing me. And with those words came the question I have been pondering ever since. What is this? What is deep soul writing? Mind you, I didn't call it deep soul writing then. It was clear that whatever I was doing wasn't standard issue journaling, but what was it? And furthermore, if I felt heard, who was listening? If I felt comforted, who was comforting me? And the really big one, who or what was bursting onto the page with such radical words of wisdom and love? A decade later, when I sat down to write this book, I returned to that question. I knew I had to offer the reader some kind of explanation of what deep soul writing is and how it works and why it works so miraculously. I labored long and hard over a chapter to address this question. In the end, I came up with an answer of sorts. It's a conversation. It's a conversation with, as the subtitle says, the extraordinary voice within. And to illustrate the endless divine dialogue, I added the magical geometric shape of the Mobius strip that has no beginning and no end. There is a small Mobius strip in the book. Here is a larger one in the My Soul Pages companion. A Mobius strip has no beginning and no end. The inside becomes the outside. And so on this, it says, if you can see that, I write, the voice listens, the voice writes, I listen. And then you can put in the voice's name. I write, whoever the name of your voice is. We're going to play with that in Deep Soul Writing with Friends. That's who's listening. And then that entity writes, and I listen. The Mobius strip is the single best sacred geometric explanation. It's a definition of deep soul writing. I thought that the Mobius strip was pretty good. Then the book came out, and Wings Bookstore in St. Petersburg, Florida, invited me to give my first talk and book signing on January 11th, 2009. The bookstore manager chose that particular date because she loved the way the mystical vibration of 1-11-11, 2009 is an 11, 1-11-11 matched the mystical power of deep soul writing. I was nervous. I was so nervous. I worked on my 20-minute talk for weeks, hoping I could find a way to answer the first question everyone was asking me about my book. Janet, what is deep soul writing? The bookstore cafe was packed with 35 familiar faces, all holding up freshly signed copies of my book. There was one man I didn't recognize. He looked to be perhaps 40, with short dark hair, black glasses. He sat on a table just inches in front of me, sipping coffee. I began my talk. Is deep soul writing journaling? Well, when you journal, you get into the alpha brainwave state where you can do some solid self-reflection. But when you soul write, you drop all the way into theta, sometimes even mystical theta. Theta matters. Theta is the threshold between worlds where magic, creativity, and breakthroughs happen. So, is deep soul writing journaling? No. Is it meditation? The somatic benefits are similar, but no, this is active dialogue, not silence. Is it prayer? Now, this question stymied me a bit. Soul writing must be prayer because it's clearly a divine connection, but it sure doesn't feel or look like any prayer you've ever known. So, what is it? The audience leaned forward for my big conclusion. I took a strong breath and declared, it is a conversation between you and your soul, a conversation between you and your beloved divine voice. Everyone smiled, except the man. He paused for a moment, then raised his hand and said, I know what this is. My heart dropped. Oh, no, no, please, fella. I have no idea who you are or why you're here, but please, please don't ruin my very first talk. But there was no getting out of it. Everyone was looking at him. I forced myself to make a wan little smile and nodded. Go on. Would you like to see what that looked like? On the page for Deep Soul Writing with Friends, I have 3 pictures, one from New York City, one from a lovely little bookstore in Minneapolis, and one in St. Petersburg, Florida. You see, you can't see all 35, but you can see people holding up the original copy of the book, and that's me in that green blouse standing behind them. And there is a man at a little round table drinking a cup of coffee. You can study that picture on the Deep Soul Writing with Friends page if you'd like. It's the first time I've ever shared it in public. I forced myself to make a wan little smile and nodded, "Go on." Not taking his eyes off mine, the stranger said, "This is a romance." I gasped. The whole room gasped. He was right. And I knew it. In that moment, I knew I had left the single most important thing about Deep Soul Writing out of my book. It is a romance, an ecstatic, endless, wild, evocative, glorious, if sometimes totally frustrating, romance. Then the strangest thing happened. The man said, "I don't know anything about this. I just came in to get a cup of coffee," got up, and walked out. 35 heads following, turning to stare at the door closing behind him. Do you know who that was? Do you know who that was? I thought I did, but really, how could I claim something so outrageous? Months later, I received a photo from a woman who had jumped to the front of Wings Cafe to take a snapshot. Sure enough, there we are, a room full of smiling people holding up my book, and one man in the front with a cup of coffee looking at me. You want to take another look? This is the picture she sent me. Everybody smiling, holding up my freshly signed copy of my book, and one man who's only looking at me. With shaking hands, I forwarded the photo to the store manager and asked her if she knew who that man was. She wrote back immediately, quote, "I do know who that is. I haven't seen him for a very long time. He comes in occasionally to get a cup of coffee, and his name is Michael." Now are you beginning to perceive an answer not only to the original question, what is deep soul writing, but perhaps to another that is beginning to surface? Why am I called to read or reread this book? And of course, I would add, and come to Deep Soul Writing with Friends. If Deep Soul Writing is a romance, and not just any romance, the romance, then you have come here to fall in love. To fall in love with your beloved. To fall in love with the mysteries of life. To fall in love with your story, the endless unfolding story of who you are and who you are becoming. To fall in love with your unique way of being in the world, and to discover and bring to life your sacred medicine, your singular gift, the gift the world is waiting for. That's what happened to me. I fell in love with deep soul writing and with my beloved, who revealed her personal name, Beloved Vibration of Sophia, exclamation point, at the winter solstice of 2014. And with that, this romance began to move at her speed, the speed of love. In the wee hours of February 24th, 2018, she whispered, "Prayer artist," in my left ear. The next morning, tears dripping onto the page, I wrote, I do not know what prayer artist means, and I'm pretty sure it changes everything, and I am scared. But if you want me to be your prayer artist, I will be your prayer artist. Immediately, the first in a whole new genre of prayer came flying through my hand. The next thing I knew, I was redefining prayer altogether, hosting intimate conversations about people's prayer lives on my podcast, Praying at the Speed of Love, and creating prayer intensives that awaken long buried memories of the mystical powers of original prayer. Michael was right. This is a romance. But I think he left out an important and rather delicious adjective. Maybe each one of us has to discover our own adjective. Here's mine. Deep Soul Writing is a radical romance. It's not an accident that Writing Down Your Soul is being reborn at this moment. When she came out in 2009, the world was roiling in a global financial crisis, and Deep Soul Writing helped us find our way as individuals. Now, 12 years later, that was the date that I wrote this in 2021. Now, 12 years later, we are once more in a global crisis, this time a pandemic that is revealing all that is false, all that is cruel, all that is broken, all that keeps us out of alignment with one another and with our precious Mother Earth. Now, I'd have to add, if I were writing this introduction today in 2025, that we are once more in a horrific global crisis, the rise of fascism. This is so interesting to me that this book always arrives at a moment when the world is desperate to birth a new way of living. This time, Deep Soul Writing may be an essential tool in helping us find our collective path to creating a world that makes love visible for all. Pick up a pen and follow where love leads, because the truth is the conversation is, was, and always will be in your holy hands. Welcome to the romance.